Natalia Titova, 62, walks as she shows her house, which was destroyed by Russian shelling, amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine in Cherniv, Ukraine April 9, 2022. Natalia and her family were staying in the basement. When the rocket hit our house, we ran into the street. It was very scary, she said. Reuters. Zora Ben-Semra. Local resident Olena and her husband Sergei are reflected on a mirror in their apartment damaged by Russian shelling in Kharkiv, Ukraine, April 11, 2022. Reuters. Alkis Konstantinides. Maria, 77, whose daughter and son-in-law died under the rubble of a building destroyed by Russian shelling, cries in Borodianka, in Kiev region, Ukraine April 8, 2022. Reuters. Gleb Garanich. A local resident looks on as service members of pro-Russian troops inspect streets during the Ukraine-Russia conflict in the southern port city of Mariupol, Ukraine April 7, 2022. Reuters. Alexander Ermoshenko. A man, who says Russian soldiers broke his arm, stands outside his house in Bucha, in Kiev region, Ukraine, April 6, 2022. Reuters. Alkis Konstantinides. Lydia Mezhiritsky and her son Oleg Mezhiritsky assessed the damage to their house after a rocket exploded outside, in a residential area in Kharkiv, Ukraine, April 8, 2022. Reuters. Thomas Peter. Zinaida Makhizhaeva, 82, reacts as she recounts how Russian soldiers treated her in Borodianka, Kiev region, Ukraine April 11, 2022. Zinaida said, "They came to my house and said go to the basement, bitch." She put a sign on her house reading, "There are people here." Soldiers started to shoot around her to scare her. God saved my life. Reuters. Zora Ben-Semra. A man smokes in his car in the village of Yakovlivka, which was hit by an aerial bombardment outside Kharkiv, April 7, 2022. Reuters. Thomas Peter. Lydia Avraменko, 74, who lost contact with her son after his building was destroyed by Russian shelling, reacts as rescuers search for bodies under the rubble of his building in Borodianka, Kiev region, Ukraine April 11, 2022. Reuters. Zora Ben-Semra. A Ukrainian soldier sits in front of a damaged school in the village of Yehedny, near to Cherniv, Ukraine, April 6, 2022. Reuters. Marco Urica. Local residents eat free food near their house, destroyed by Russian shelling in Borodianka, in Kiev region, Ukraine April 8, 2022. Reuters. Gleb Garanich. Local resident Olena looks from the window of her apartment damaged by shelling in Kharkiv, Ukraine, April 11, 2022. Reuters. Alkis Konstantinides. A service member of pro-Russian troops checks the documents of a local resident during Ukraine-Russia conflict in the southern port city of Mariupol, Ukraine April 7, 2022. Reuters. Alexander Ermoshenko. A man pushes his bicycle in Bucha, in Kiev region, Ukraine, April 6, 2022. Reuters. Alkis Konstantinides. Lyubov Komenko reacts as she walks through her destroyed house in the village of Andriivka, in the Kiev region, Ukraine, April 7, 2022. Reuters. Marco Urica. A service member of pro-Russian troops carries out a search of a house during the Ukraine-Russia conflict in the southern port city of Mariupol, Ukraine April 7, 2022. Reuters. Alexander Ermoshenko. People wait to receive humanitarian aid in the village of Sloboda, outside Cherniv, Ukraine, April 5, 2022. Reuters. Marco Eurica. Village resident Ala Hubs, whose 31-year-old son Andriy died in an aerial bombardment that destroyed their home, stands by her house in Yakovlivka outside Kharkiv, April 6, 2022. Reuters. Thomas Peter. Local resident Sergei stands next to his damaged window as two men look at an explosion crater following shelling in Kharkiv, Ukraine, April 11, 2022. Reuters. Alkis Konstantinides. Locals sit in front of their house in the village of Andriivka, in the Kiev region, Ukraine, April 7, 2022. Reuters. Marco Eurica. A local woman reacts next to her house damaged by heavy shelling and airstrikes in Chernihiv, Ukraine, April 6, 2022. Reuters. Serhiy Nuzhenenko. A woman waits to be evacuated from the heavily shelled town of Verkhovny outside Kharkiv in Ukraine, April 6, 2022. Reuters. Thomas Peter. A woman walks past burnt-out vehicle in the village of Sloboda, outside Chernihiv, Ukraine, April 5, 2022. Reuters. Marco Eurica. A couple hugs while walking past a building that was heavily damaged by shelling in Kharkiv, Ukraine, April 10, 2022. Reuters. Alkis Konstantinides.